Dropping major truth bombs, Prime Minister Narendra Modi was in a red-hot form on Friday. Seldom does one see Prime Minister Modi unabashedly talk about the developed nations trying to curtail the growth story of the developing nations, especially India, and even less of the judiciary hindering the country's progress. However, in a function at Vigyan Bhavan, PM Modi did both, and with some elan and swagger. Hi and welcome. You're watching TFI English, the national socio-political analysis arm of the TFI Media Group. I'm your host Tribhuvan, and in this video, I will tell you about PM Modi's no-holds-barred speech aimed against climate change, fake activists, and the judiciary. Let's begin. It was vintage Prime Minister Narendra Modi at his best, as he combined his unmatched oratory skills with shrewd tactical timings to hit two birds with one stone on the occasion of Constitution Day celebrations organized by the Supreme Court. Speaking at the event, PM Modi called for doing away with the colonial mindset, which is giving rise to many distortions as India increased its effort to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement on environmental conservation. At the same time, he took a dig at the judiciary for being swayed away by the bogus PIL culture. In front of the Chief Justice of India and other high members of the judiciary, Prime Minister Modi remarked, "Today, there is no nation in the world that exists as a colony of another nation. But this does not mean that the colonial mindset has ended. The mindset is giving rise to many distortions. We can see a clear example of this in the hurdles cropping up in the development journey of developing nations. Efforts are made to close the means and path for development of developing nations." PM Modi did not stop here and subtly took a jibe at the judiciary of the country, which often gets entangled in the PIL mess of vested interest groups and foreign-funded NGOs. PM Modi said, "But it is unfortunate that in our country too, due to such a mentality, obstacles are put in the path of development, be it in the name of freedom of expression or something else. We are the only country in the process of achieving the goals of the Paris Agreement ahead of time. And yet, in the name of environment, various pressures are created on India. All this is the result of colonial mentality." Shredding the developed nations for trying to hinder the development plans for the developing nations, Prime Minister Modi further remarked, "Attempts are made to shut the path and resources for developing nations through which developed nations reached where they are today. In past decades, a web of different terminologies was spun for this, but the aim has always been one, to stop the progress of developing nations." He also referred to COP26 summit held last month and emphasized, "The issue of environment is also being attempted to be hijacked for this purpose. We saw an example of this in the recent COP26 summit. If we talk of absolute cumulative emissions, developed nations have caused 15% more emissions than India since 1850 till date." This is not the first time that PM Modi or his government has played on the front foot and targeted the pseudo-environmentalists who have problem with India and the country trying to achieve its developmental and environmental goals simultaneously. Before PM Modi was to depart for the COP26 summit in Glasgow, India had fired the shots by posting a bold demand. Reported by TFI, the Environment Ministry had asked for compensation from developed nations for the losses caused by climate disasters due to their recklessness. Rameshwar Prasad Gupta, the ministry's senior-most civil servant, remarked, "Our ask is this: there should be a compensation for expenses incurred, and it should be borne by developed nations." He also added that India stood with other low-income and developing countries on the matter. The developed nations did not like India's stern defiance, and it only aggravated the lot further when India refused to take the net zero carbon emission pledge by 2050. PM Modi gave his own deadline of 2070 and walked out, keeping his country at the forefront. To get back at India, the Western world spread the false news that India had replaced the term phase out of coal with phase down. However, it was the US that at first coined the term while holding a meeting with China on the sidelines of the summit. Even when Barack Obama was in power, PM Modi had not shied away from targeting the West for its double standards. At the time, PM Modi had said, "The prosperous still have a strong carbon footprint, and the world's billions at the bottom of the development ladder are seeking space to grow. So the choices are not easy." As far as the environmentalist NGOs are concerned, the judiciary of the country has given them ample room to breathe and hinder the country's development. The biggest example of the fatal concoction of NGOs and the judiciary making a mess of gigantic proportions is the Sterlite copper plant. At one time, India was one of the biggest exporters of copper, but the foreign-funded NGOs ensured that Sterlite plant was closed and as a result, the total import of copper reached 14,000 crore rupees in the last fiscal year. Countries like Japan, Singapore, Congo, Chile, Tanzania, the United Arab Emirates, and South Africa have benefited from this. Imports rose by 131.2%, while the export of copper cathodes fell by 87.4% from 395 kilotons financial year 18 to 48 kilotons in financial year 19. Imagine the money and profit made from the export of copper that could have been used for other green initiatives. But instead, the exchequer is coughing billions in exporting what can be easily manufactured here in the backyard. PM Modi is well and truly aware that there is a concerted effort to derail the development locomotive of the country. Ever since taking charge of the PM seat, PM Modi had toned down his attacking instincts on public forums. However, in the last few months, he has certainly changed his tactics, which augurs well for the country.